Before I start the video, I have to address my style of crash videos. At first, my crash videos always consist of bad editing and bad research, then moving to better research and better editing. However, with very cringeful intros. Well, starting from my MH17 and Lion Air Flight 610 video, I will instantly start the video and talk about what people are here for. I'm sorry for wasting your time, however, it's an announcement I had to say. Now, onto the video.
Audio Jungle.
(1946 to 1991), the Cold War. Two of the biggest nations in the world going toe-to-toe in an active confrontation. The US had been sending in spy planes into the Soviet Union to get information and advantages over the Russians. Of course, it was a risky maneuver and there was a U-2 shutdown at one point. However, a different kind of disaster was emerging. During one fateful night, a Boeing 747-200 was on its way from JFK International Airport from New York to Gimpo Airport in Seoul, Korea. The plane takes off uneventfully and continues on its journey to its destination. On board were 246 passengers and 23 crew members, most of which were Korean heading home. The pilots of the mighty plane were Captain Chun Bung-yin, First Officer Sun Dong-hui, and Flight Engineer Kim Yu-dong. I am very sorry if I mispronounced their name. During the war, the Russians were very serious when planes entered their airspace, so the planes first had to stop at the Anchorage airport to refuel. Well, here's the part of the story where things gets complicated. You see, planes use these signals called waypoints to build their flight plan. They usually have names like Nippy or Battle. Pilots use a system called INS to input coordinates of their waypoints. Modern airliners often use their flight management computers as they are more reliable. So since you understand this now, once the plane takes off, they had to set their autopilot on the INS setting. But for no reason at all, the pilots completely forgotten to do it. The pilots were not alarmed by this, so the plane kept drifting and drifting into a place no plane was supposed to be. Air traffic control tells the flights to tell them what waypoint they were at, as their radar has a reach limit, so that they could verify the plane's position. The plane was now a few hours into their flight and cruising smoothly at 33,000 feet. Dinner was served and passengers began to settle down for the night. What makes this flight so special is that another flight was just behind KAL Flight 7, that is KAL Flight 015. Since it was a long flight ahead, the two planes engaged in conversations to pass the time. This will play a role later. The plane had drifted miles away from its original flight plan and was flying over the island of Sakhalin, where its radar signal was picked up by the Russian Air Force. The Russians scrambled a Sukhoi SU-15 to intercept the unwanted intruder. The pilot of the interceptor was Major Gennady Osovich. Back in the air, the behind flight of KAL Flight 7 complained about a tailwind of 35 knots, but KAL Flight 7 was experiencing a slight headwind. It was only a matter of minutes before the fighter caught up with its target. In the cold dark night, the plane's livery could not be seen. However, the strobe lights of the plane can help identify if the plane was a passenger aircraft. But in Osovich's words,
I saw the plane. It did look like a civilian plane because there was a flashing light on its tail and one on the top. But you can disguise any plane like this. You can put a flashing light on and you've got a civilian plane. So I did not have any thoughts about this.
Countless warning shots were fired, but were not noticed by the pilots. Then they made a terrible mistake. To save fuel, they asked air traffic control to climb to an altitude of 35,000 feet. The plane then started the climb. To the Russians, this was an act of evasive maneuver. After negotiating was out of the window, Major Osovich gets his permission to engage. He fires two K-8 air-to-air missiles onto the innocent flight. It took only 15 seconds before the missiles penetrated the plane. The missiles explodes a few feet away from the target. Shrapnels from the missile drilled holes into the outer skin of the aircraft, causing a rapid explosive decompression and cuts off many important hydraulic lines. The elevator system gets damaged, causing the plane to climb, then dive down into the Sea of Japan. Unfortunately, all 269 people on board were lost in an instant. In every plane accident, there's always an investigation to explain what happened, but in the case of KAL Flight 7, it took way longer than it should. When the search team had reached the crash site, the black boxes were nowhere to be seen. After a few days of negotiating, the Russians finally admitted that they had shot down KAL Flight 7. What was more shocking is that the Russians had took the most important black boxes from the wreckage. And for almost 9 years, the explanation on how the plane drifted that far from its flight plan remains a mystery. Until...
For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
In 1991, the Russians unexpectedly revealed the black boxes to the public. It was a total shock, and the investigators now understand why the plane drifted that far from their original flight plan. The final report of the investigation tells airlines to equip their planes with a clear sign of the autopilot setting to avoid drifting from their flight plan. To make it simple, now planes' flight management computers will show a clear picture of what the autopilot setting the plane is on, plus additional information about where the plane is heading. The change was made quick and airlines instantly made improvements on how commercial aviation works. The flight consists of a handful of South Koreans, Americans, Japanese, and more. So many countries and families were shaken and heartbroken. Major Osovich was deeply affected from the events of that night. He convinced himself that he shot down an enemy plane and it was not a passenger aircraft, filled with 269 people on board. Till this day, he still feels the same way and relives that night every day. The moral of this story is that war between no matter how many nations will in fact affect the rest of the world.